Dr Deborah Russell.
Mr Speaker, the National-led government has been adamant that it will meet its climate goals. In December last year, the Minister for Climate Change assured this House that the government was committed to meeting its climate change goals. Just 1 week ago, in the annual review debate on climate change, the Minister said, quote, in his first contribution, quote, "I want to make it very clear from the outset that as a government we are committed to meeting our climate change goals." That's the words of this Minister. And how was that government going to meet its climate change goals? Well, they've placed a huge reliance on, and again I'm quoting from the Minister's own speech, on recognising carbon capture, utilisation and storage. And it was going to do it through the emissions trading scheme. And in fact, if we look at the government's emissions reduction plans, all the way through it, there are references to to sequestration of carbon dioxide from industries. It's sitting there on page 9 of their latest emissions reduction plan. It's sitting there again on page 16. It's sitting there on page, let me see it, page 34. It's through and through and through the emissions reduction plan. And in fact, it talks about carbon capture, utilisation and storage, and says, and it's again sitting in their own plan, that the most likely opportunity for carbon capture, utilisation and storage is to establish sequestration facilities at existing gas fields during this emissions budget period and the next one. That's what they're relying on. And in fact, we know that in terms of meeting the 2050 Paris goals, that around about 30% of the weight of that is carried by carbon capture and sequestration. Well, bad news. Bad news, because that all hinged on a project at Kapuni in Taranaki, a project run by Todd Energy, which Todd Energy now says it cannot do at the current carbon price. That it is not economic at the current carbon price. So that government's plan for meeting its climate goals, despite the Minister's fine words about meeting their climate goals, has just gone up in, well, smoke, I suppose, would be the word for it. They have totally lost out. Now that begs one hell of a question, Mr Speaker. How on earth is that government going to meet its climate goals? Now, it could have been that perhaps, given that Todd Energy says this can't be achieved through the current carbon price, that government could have used something like, I don't know, the Climate Emergency Response Fund to fund Todd Energy to do that. Except that fund's disappeared, folded up into tax cuts, but now not there to provide other measures to reduce carbon in our atmosphere. It could have been that they perhaps would subsidise Todd Energy. You know, we subsidise carbon reduction at Glenfield Steel Mill. That took the equivalent number of cars that run the road in Christchurch every day off the road. That was the climate effect of that. It was really, really effective. But that government has taken that option away. Their magic technology solutions have failed. They are not available to meet the climate goals. That government needs to engage in some serious thinking about how it is going to meet our 2050 climate goals. You know, they've got magical thinking on technology. They've got magical thinking around the Paris commitments. In fact, I see a fair amount of magical thinking around climate altogether, refusing to grapple with it and hoping that some solution will just pop out of the air, instead of doing the hard yards to actually address climate change in this country. And I keep on saying it's magical, because they appear not to even really believe in climate change, given their lack of commitment to action. Well, I'm telling them, they may not believe in climate change, but their insurance company certainly does. That's right. And the people who insure New Zealand for natural hazards certainly do. We are now facing some real worries around that too. It is time for that government to stop its magical thinking and actually grapple with the real challenge of climate change.